We have heard this narrative over and over again, that the competition is coming, that Tesla is going to be under pressure, and that new entrants are to be viewed as Tesla killers. Now, these arguments are simply ridiculous in my opinion. The notion that there isn't room for more than one player in a market as big as the electric vehicle space is just, well, stupid. I mean, did Samsung kill Apple? Did Xbox or Nintendo kill PlayStation? I have commented in a previous video that the size of the electric vehicle market is immense, most likely bigger than we think, and that the internal combustion to EV transition is not likely to be a one-for-one swap. I have also argued that competition is good for Tesla. In fact, it is good for the EV industry in general. When a single company is pitching the benefits of battery electric vehicles, many might remain skeptical. But when the largest auto manufacturers in the US are pitching the same message and making pledges to move away from internal combustion engines, and when this guy is telling you that these companies are on top of things, then as consumers, we are far more likely to pay attention. So no, the F-150 or the Mach-E or Neo or Hyundai or whatever the hell GM is planning to actually launch are not Tesla killers. The real Tesla killers are evident from this observation. Those who apply brakes to the wheels of progress are usually those who stand the most to lose. It is a quote made by, well, yours truly. I just made it up. But I think it's fitting, because the real Tesla killers are actually the forces working against EV adoption in general. Now, I call them Tesla killers because Tesla is so synonymous with electric vehicles. But in reality, the forces I am describing are electric vehicle killers, with Tesla being the prime target for now. The oil industry. It is no secret this industry is severely threatened by electric vehicle adoption. And they have not been idle. They have been fighting tooth and nail for decades. The fight started with climate change denial, and they have been beating that drum for ages. To give you some perspective on how hard they have fought this and for how long, have a look at an excerpt from The Daily Show with John Stewart back in 2014 already. One of my favorites, which I've posted a link to in the description below. In the clip, some clearly influenced House representatives put together some ridiculously outlandish arguments denying climate change. Let me give you a few examples.
And the lead scientist at NASA said this. He said that what ended the Ice Age was global wobbling. Is the wobbling of the Earth included in any of your modelings? And the answer was no.
The last few years we've gone from global warming to now climate change, since the temperature of the Earth hasn't changed in many, many years.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that if I may.
Yeah, I mean, there's public comments out there that question has been asked and answered saying no.
You should look at the scientific literature rather than the public comments. The fact
of all
is,
the climatologists whose career depends on the climate changing to keep themselves publishing articles, yes, I could read that, but I don't believe it.
In his typical razor-sharp style, John Stewart was quick to point out that some of the major contributors to these representatives were none other than Murray Energy, Koch Enterprises, and Peabody Energy. But eventually, it took a 16-year-old named Greta to bring the matter to the attention of the world, and the world started to listen. And what did the oil industry do? Well, they upped their game and roped in the services of a United States president. This saw the US roll back over 100 rules and regulations on pollution, and it resulted in the US being withdrawn from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. And if you think Donald Trump was not influenced by big oil, in 2016, he was the second largest recipient of donations from the oil and gas sector in the USA, second only to Senator Ted Cruz. In 2020, he was the largest recipient by far, double Joe Biden's receipt and 3 times more than what the oil industry gave him in 2016. But eventually, a maverick visionary built a $1 trillion electric vehicle industry from scratch, and the world was no longer just paying attention, it was getting on board. So what did the oil industry do? Well, they changed the narrative. And they lobbied, of course. Their campaign contributions continued to increase. Now, however, The message is less about climate change denial and more about how efficiently we can burn fossil fuel. And they are openly attacking the electric vehicle industry, claiming inefficiencies all the way from how the batteries are made to how electrical grid has to continue to rely on fossil fuels. And they are being supported by some automakers that are still stuck in the gates, like BMW with their warnings about ending gas cars prematurely. But probably the biggest victory for the oil industry of late is the inclusion of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in the Green Energy Plan, as well as Europe's sustainable investment strategies. But they are slowly starting to lose this battle, as plug-in hybrids start to get classified as interim solutions towards zero-emission mobility goals. That is, of course, until the next Donald Trump comes along and plays the role of Tesla killer. Now let's talk about dealerships. The direct-to-consumer business model is pretty much essential for sustainable EV production. Auto manufacturers need serious economies of scale to produce EVs profitably, and the ramp-up stages of production will have manufacturers facing significant margin pressure. The easiest way to solve this problem is to remove the middleman in the sales process, which naturally leaves dealerships hanging, and new vehicle sales are not the only problem. After-sales servicing is a big industry too, and EVs are dramatically changing this. A typical internal combustion engine vehicle has a 7,500-mile service interval, while Tesla advocates doing a check-in every 12,500 miles. But that check-in is basically a diagnostic process, where they might clean and lubricate your brake calipers, but other than that, Tesla advocates an as-needed service, where things like brake fluid or filters need replacing. Internal combustion engines require regular maintenance. They have valves, transmission systems, oil changes, rings, filters, and a host of diagnostics that need to be performed. It is estimated that around 2 million people work in the US dealership networks, making this a very large industry that is basically in danger of being rendered obsolete. And they are fighting back hard. Campaign contributions are up dramatically since 2020, and they appear to be having some measure of success, like this nonsense here in Oklahoma, where the House Business and Commerce Committee has passed a bill preventing auto manufacturers from selling or servicing cars directly to consumers. If this catches on, it'll hurt EV adoption for certain, because auto manufacturers will have a hell of a time bringing the final sales price down to an acceptable level. And the EV tax credit benefit will just get whittled away by price increases and dealership surcharges and margins. And now onto the topic of road taxes. Roads cost money, both to build and maintain. In the US, there is the Highway Trust Fund, established in 1956, for funding construction and maintenance of the interstate highway system. It is largely funded by an excise tax of 18.4 cents per gallon charged on gasoline sales and 24.4 cents per gallon for diesel fuel. Similarly, local governments and states have their own roads to maintain, and they also obtain funds through taxing of fuel. It varies from state to state, with California charging the highest levy around 67 cents a gallon, and Alaska appearing to be the cheapest at 15 cents. Now, reportedly, this source of funding is still not enough. And in 2019, motor fuel taxation accounted for around 26% of state spend on transportation. But it is still a healthy chunk of change, with states raising around $52 billion in 2019, which is the most recent set of stats that I was able to obtain. Now, the thing to note is that a fuel levy is, in effect, a user fee or a toll. I mean, unless you are using gasoline as some sort of secret sauce for your barbecue, then most likely it is ending up in your engine and you're using it to drive on the roads. Electric vehicles will eliminate this tax, and you can't really put a surcharge on electricity, because then you no longer have the same user fee effect. Even those who don't own cars will now be contributing to the transportation levy. The situation is even more exaggerated when you consider the sheer volumes of EV owners who have solar installations and are therefore not paying any motor or gasoline taxes at all. Alternatives will have to be found, and this is where the issue is likely to creep in. When you remove a $50 billion revenue stream from states who are already underfunded for roads maintenance, some are going to push back. And this pushback could get really heavy-handed, especially when some overzealous governor recognizes a new revenue stream that could cover the already existing shortfall. And since there are soon to be incentives in place, said governor might feel inclined to go after them. This would be a disaster for EVs, since lower cost of ownership is a major selling point. Now, if you think this is a far-fetched situation, then pay attention to what we have just seen the California Public Utilities Commission attempt earlier in 2022, when they tried to reform solar credits in California. So who else loses? Well, there are a bunch of industries at risk. The $200 billion auto finance market, for example, are not going to be too happy when the resale value of the internal combustion engine cars they have financed start to plummet. Understand that those vehicles constitute the security for the loans they have issued. So when the value plummets, pretty much all the vehicle owners will be in a negative equity situation. Never a good thing for a finance house. Then we have the $300 billion auto insurance market, who are also going to be fighting tooth and nail against autonomous driving that threatens their income stream. And I can promise you that the taxi industry are not going to simply bow down to the robotaxi business model. The challenges Uber faced when disrupting the industry are going to be mild compared to the pushback that self-driving taxis will face. And while we are on the topic of autonomous driving, Cruise and Waymo have made significant progress in this space, as much as Tesla fans don't want to admit this. But these technologies are not yet targeted for mass adoption in vehicles. They have escaped the bulk of the FUD, cynicism, and blatant biased negative press. Tesla's FSD, on the other hand, is targeting mass adoption in their entire fleet. And the veracity of the techs on this program are astounding. Now, why is this? Well, quite simply because it represents a game changer, a feature that will become indispensable and unrivaled. If Tesla pulls it off, then competing car manufacturers will be relegated to competing for low-margin scraps, while Tesla will have an unchallenged runway to vehicle sales domination. So the attacks are heavy. For example, full-page news articles like this one, sponsored by this guy, the CEO of a company that, surprise, surprise, makes autonomous vehicle driving solutions. And how long do you think it will take before an overzealous regulator or a morals are somewhat lacking senator takes this matter on? So in summary, competition is good for EVs and really good for Tesla. FUD, lobbyists, politicians, and dirty tactics propagated by those who are going to lose are not good. Tesla found this out the hard way when they eventually had to drop the turn the other cheek PR strategy in China and start fighting back. They had to do this because regulators were starting to pay attention, and this was starting to create unnecessary problems and bad press. But there's one thing I am certain of. Tesla is the juggernaut. Its momentum cannot be stopped, and I don't even think you can slow them down anymore. They have too much demand, too much capability to produce, too many governments and activists edging them on, and too much innovation and creativity to shut them down. Change is coming, and it is coming faster than most are comfortable with. But not me. I say it cannot happen fast enough. Thank you for listening. If you like this video, please could you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel? It goes a long way to supporting me. Also, if you want to get an idea of Tesla's unbelievable growth rate, check out the visual representation I put together here. And this is the link to my commentary on why I believe the EV market is going to be way bigger than we think.